Thanks for listening to Leadership Level Up. I'm Brian Prairie.
And I'm Dr. Jeff Williamson.
I am just starting my leadership journey.
And I've been guiding leaders for 30 years.
Our podcast aims to shine a spotlight on outstanding leaders and provide a platform for them to describe their leadership journey and share the guiding principles that have helped them become great leaders.
Welcome to Leadership Level Up podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Williamson, with my co-host, Brian Prairie. And we are really happy to have someone back that we had on a previous episode, and that's Rachel Druckenmiller. Welcome back, Rachel.
Thanks. I'm excited for this conversation, and like you guys always do a good job of bringing new and interesting things out of people. So I'm looking forward to this.
Well, we try. So I want to tell them a little bit about some things you have coming up, and then we'll let you do most of the talking about those. Besides many recognitions as a speaker and Workforce Magazine, Forbes, a bunch of impressive honors that you deserve and have received. We're wanting to talk a little bit more this episode about where you began to realize you wanted to unmute yourself. Mm-hmm. You needed to make some changes in your life. And that led to the formation of your business, to your organization, which love to hear more about that. And then I also want to hear about two key things, and that's your music and recording, that as a growth area for your recent years of really being fully you. And then I also want to hear about this little thing called a TED Talk you're going to be a part of here very soon. So feel free to jump into any of that you'd like to. I'm excited.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm a big journaler, and I have a stack of journals. I can remember what season of my life I wrote and which one. And starting in 2015, at the time, I was the director of wellbeing for the company where I was working. And I had a food blog that I had started a few years earlier called Rachel's Nourishing Kitchen. And I was writing ideas. I always was doing this in my journals, writing down ideas for things for the future. And there was something I wrote down of unmute your plate, because something that was a big catalyst for me was changing my diet when I was in my early 20s, which helped me heal from some chronic health issues I'd had my whole life that I didn't know I didn't have to have. I thought, oh, you cannot have acid reflux. You cannot have ear infections. You cannot get sinus congestion every year. I didn't know that there were alternatives to what I had been experiencing. And part of my journey had been, bringing color and life literally to my plate, to what I was eating. And so it started through that actually lens of thinking about what it meant to unmute. So it was in 2015. I wrote in my journal, I started writing about that. And then, as the next few years went along, I had different experiences of recognizing that I was pushing and suppressing certain things about myself down that I wanted to release. And I think all of us do this in some way. We have aspects of who we are that either somebody else or we've told ourselves, that's too much. You're not good enough. You're not qualified. You're too young. You're too old. Maybe not. Remember last time we did that? You look like a total fool. Like, don't embarrass yourself again. We have these narrative running in our head that tells us, that basically keeps us silent. And for a lot of us, it begins at some point when we're very little. And for me, I've thought about this, what really sparked this muting in me? And I think from the time I was little, I watched my parents' dysfunction in their marriage, that they ended up healing and recovering, but I watched this dysfunction, and I think I internally, subconsciously as a kid, decided, well, I'm not going to be trouble for anyone. I'm going to do what's expected of me, and I'm going to excel and exceed expectations, and I'm going to do a good job, and I'm going to be a good student. I'm going to be a good daughter. I'm going to be the golden child. Not consciously, but that's essentially what I was deciding to do. And well, that kid doesn't really express anything they're not certain of. Creativity, what certainty is there in creativity? Really not a whole lot. It's a risk. It's a risk to be creative, to express yourself, Or if I had a feeling, if I felt scared or I felt sad or I felt angry, oh, no. Good girls are not those things. Be a good little girl. So it's not like I remember one specific person telling me that, but that was sort of what got me to that point. And all of us have some version of ourselves that had some version of that experience where we were told, you need to tamp it down. And so it's been for me, this unraveling. People have asked, when's the moment you got unmuted? I'm like, well, first of all, this has been an unfolding process that I have been going through my whole life, that I anticipate I will continue to go through the rest of my life. It never ends, but we feel more confident. It's like a layer is removed. There's a part of ourselves that we allow to show up authentically. And then that is really what feels unmuted, when this bold, honest, authentic form of self-expression emerges in us, whether it's a willingness to share our emotions, a willingness to speak up and ask for what we need, advocate for ourselves, to share our talents, to share our gifts, to let ourselves shine in some way. I think that it takes time, and it takes a realization that we're even doing it. Most of us don't realize we're doing this. All of us have some way we're doing it. We don't realize we're doing it. And so even recognizing, what is a way that I'm silencing myself or holding myself back, and what's the cost of it? Mm-hmm. What's the cost? And so I started to, go through different pieces of my journey, and recognizing that the cost was that I felt confined and restricted and small and diminished and stuck and not free and disconnected from myself and other people. And I didn't want to live that way anymore. And so it's over the past, I would say in particular, 20 years, I've been challenging myself in different ways, personally, professionally, creatively, to allow the most authentic part of myself to come out of hiding.
And I know you love butterflies. And so the whole picture of the chrysalis and the process of becoming, I think that's partly why you love that image so much.
Yeah. Butterflies and peacocks. Peacocks, are all over my house. They're everywhere, because I see those two creatures. The butterfly, to your point, goes through that chrysalis moment and then emerges this beautiful thing that you couldn't have seen from the beginning. And then the peacock is just spread out, right? With feathers fanned. Hello, I'm here. I'm not hiding.
Check this out.
I'm not demanding gaze.
Right.
I'm just showing up in my fullness, and gaze makes its way there. It's not a demand, it's an invitation.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and that's what I think the most effective form of unmuting is we're inviting people into a moment of aliveness as they watch us experience that. And they're like, I want what she's having, like that's what I think it becomes. It becomes, as opposed to, unmute yourself, just say what you need to say and do what you need to. It's not this aggressive thing. It's this, it's a release. It's not a push. It's a release.
Yeah. And I've had to learn too that, that we don't want to pop the lid off, so to speak. Mm-hmm. It's this progressive exhale from a place deeper than our lungs, right? Yeah. So we're kind of I was thinking back as you were talking about that, back in my grad school years, I was doing some interviews with college students as a part of my research. And of course, I love strengths, and I've done a lot of work with that. And a part of the interview, I asked the student, what's some takeaways or some things that you'll carry with you after this 3-4 month process of learning. And she waited a minute and she said, for the first time in my life, I feel like it's okay to be me. Mm. And I remember thinking, she's 18 years old and she just now feels like it's okay to be herself. But that so resonated back, knowing your story and how you really have articulated that you get that young lady. That was 20 years ago. So she's about, somewhere in her 30s now too. But you resonate with that because that's part of your story too.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the strengths thing, because I feel assessment tools, while we don't want them to define us, can be a catalyst for insight about ourselves that can help us to get unmuted. So I'm a big advocate of talking about that. So certainly Clifton Strengths is one I've used. The really catalytic thing for me was the predictive index. It was 2016, maybe 2015, might've been 2014 at my job. And we did this assessment and I got the results back. And as the HR consultant was sitting there reading me the results back, I felt for the first time, it was 30 years old, 30, depending on, 30, 32. And I'm like, yes, that is who I am. Can we tell everybody else? That is, yes, that is me. And it wasn't until that particular assessment has different, archetypes for people. And mine was called the captain. And I asked our HR director years later, I said, I'm just curious. I know we publicize everyone's profiles. Is there anyone else at this company that has that same archetype out of 70 people? Including, this isn't a knock on them, but including the leadership team. And she said, nobody. You're the only person in the company that has that archetype. So no wonder I feel like I don't fit in. Like, because I'm different. I am fundamentally different than everyone else that I'm working with in the way that I'm wired. And I'm grateful that that role was so important for me for so many reasons, and staying there as long as I did and getting this reps in and all that was so essential to getting where I am now. But that was an eye opener for me. So sometimes for people, if they're feeling stuck, take an assessment, see what it says, notice the themes that emerge, notice what consistently comes out about you that you might overlook because we're blind. We're blind to our own brilliance, and we don't necessarily see what is there because it's who we are. We live with ourselves. We're in our body all the time. We miss things that other people or some other tool might be able to reveal to us that could really be a catalyst for us to change something.
Absolutely.
I'm a strong proponent of strengths because of Jeff. He had me take a strengths test and was like, hey, I want you to do this. And I was like, okay. Because I was taking on new leadership roles, and I was just kind of like shotgunning all of the ideas, nothing. What's tech? Like, okay, that's tech. Okay, cool. That didn't work. And it was kind of frustrating because I was like, I didn't really know what the heck I was doing. But once I took the strength test, I was like, oh, this is why I'm doing these things, and this is why I can communicate this way, and I can lean into those things. Like, oh, that's awesome. So, yes, everything about it. I love that you said it doesn't have to be strengths either. It can be something that tells you a little bit more about yourself that maybe you don't know.
Yeah. I agree.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And I love those moments, whether it was Brian or other people that I've worked with, when they kind of have that, that look. I'm like, oh my gosh, I get something I've never understood before. And obviously that's why I'm a fan of assessments in general, but of course the strengths as well. So as you were talking about being the captain too, as your archetype, we tend to think, oh no one else has that. But I know the way I've watched your journey and my own is like, now I think we're more likely to go, sweet, nobody else has that, right? And so I will often remind people on the strength side of things to say, Gallup has done the math, and the odds of someone having your top 5 strengths in the same order is 1 in 33 million. Right? So we grow up hearing, you're 1 in a million, Rachel, you're 1 in a million, Brian. And in reality, it's more than that. And so I just affirm that it's like, sweet, I'm 1 in 33 million, as opposed to, gee whiz, no, I'm not like anybody else. Well, we've learned to love that. And I love that about your journey too.
Yeah. Embrace the difference. And it takes courage to do that. It doesn't take courage to do what everyone else is doing or be the way everyone else is being. That doesn't take courage. And now it's not to say that being different isn't scary. It is. Do you risk, we have this decision to make. I'm spoiler alert, going to be talking about this in my TED Talk, but we have this decision to make from the time we're very young to be, and I learned this from Dr. Gabor Mate, who wrote a book called The Myth of Normal. And he's written a bunch of other books, but he's a physician whose work focuses on the intersection of trauma, addiction, stress, and development. And so he says from the time we're very little, we have a decision to make, to be in attachment, which is to be in close connection or meaningful relationship with another person, or to be authentic, to acknowledge and act on our thoughts, feelings, opinions, needs. But most people they default to attachment over authenticity because being in connection is fundamental to our survival, but being authentic is not. And so we compromise ourselves, what we think, what we feel, what we want, who we are, what our giftings are. We compromise those things because we decide, what, I'd rather be part of the crowd than be a loner out here doing these other things that pull me out of the crowd. And so we compromise who we are. And that is, I think, one of the most significant ways that we mute ourselves. And we do it for good reasons, right? Survival's a kind of a critical thing, and not wanting to rock the boat and wanting to avoid conflict and wanting to keep the peace and wanting to make sure that people approve of us. I mean, these are all, to an extent, smart things to do socially. But they often lead us down a path, I think, of regret and resentment that a lot of people end up on, that they don't realize that, hey, if you were willing to be a little more authentic, it might compromise, it might cause some attachments to waver a little bit, but the strongest attachments, the strongest relationships we have are relationships that are rooted in authenticity anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was thinking of the visual when you talked about, being authentic and kind of stepping away into your own space. One of the beautiful things I've discovered, and I'm guessing you have too, is like when we choose to stand out and be real and authentic with who we are, that some of the people that were over in the mob, they start drifting our way because they like the thought that they can find other people who are not just carrying their facade or being this imposter of what we think we're supposed to be. So I love that visual of us drawing others to us when we are just who we are, being authentic, realistic. Now, you reference your TED Talk, so I'd love to hear a little bit more. I don't want to total spoil it, because I know that's going to be a blast and a smash when that comes out, but maybe some little tidbits you could share with us that are going to be a part of that.
Well, by the time everyone hears this, it should be released, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Awesome.
But this has been a dream of mine for a long time. I've watched TED Talks for over 20 years. I have been inspired and captivated by the nature of, of what they are. And so for the past 3 or 4 years, my husband and I do this year-end reflection thing at the end of the year. And we write words and answer questions and draw pictures of what the year ahead can look like. And for the past 3 years, I've drawn a red circle colored in with the words TEDx around it. And it wasn't until the fall, maybe December of 2021, that I said, I'm going to hire a coach that does this. Again, resourcing yourself. I have enough to do on top of what I'm already doing for my job. I don't want to have to figure out how to get this together, how to put the pitch together, how to find the right places I don't want to have to do that work. And so I found someone that's what she does. And she used to be an organizer. And so she knows what to do. And, we went back and forth. And to be honest with you, I sat on this. I was May of 2022. I had some initial concepts I knew the general thing I wanted to talk about, right? Which is related to, basically unmuting yourself without using that language. And because TED's interesting, you can't be self-promoting with your business at all. You can't say, hey, this is my website. This is my research. You can't even, you have to sort of appear agnostic to yourself, it's a very interesting thing to do.
We're going to let you share all of that on this one. So,
yeah.
So, it's like if I tell you, I probably would have used something around unmuting, but I don't even say that word at one time in the talk. But anyway, I got to May of 2022 and I had this outline put together and something wasn't feeling right. I was like, I'm super excited about this. And then October of 22. So I basically just ghosted her for 4 or 5 months. And then October 2022, I do a keynote in Michigan. And it was a different keynote than I'd ever done before. I did it specifically for this client. And it was me asking a series of questions to invite people into moments of insight, which is essentially, as I've now come to look back on all of my talks, that's what I do in every talk. It's like I'm using curiosity as a catalyst for insight. And so people can find clarity and courage. And so I'm on the plane on the way back. And I had this eureka moment of, I know what I want. I know what I want to do for this talk now. I want it to be about these, 3 questions that I'm going to be asking that I hope will elicit some type of insight in people, that they can be more honest with themselves about how they're showing up. And so I sent it off to her and she's like, love it. Looks great. And then the interesting thing is I thought I was going to have an event that I was doing in April. I was a finalist for another TEDx event in Syracuse. And it went on and we're 3 weeks out and I had no response yet. I was like, I need to prepare. I don't have enough time to prepare this now. it was a no, and it worked out that it was a no. And then you cannot make this stuff up. Talking about allowing the unfolding. I get a notification that I'm a finalist for TEDx Rockville, which is just outside of DC and about an hour from where I live. And that the theme is fresh perspectives, which is something that I feel like I provide, is, unique ways of talking and looking at, talking about and looking at things that are different, the way I combine things and other maybe people have heard before. And then I saw the date, that it was July 8th, which is my birthday. And I was like, you can't.
I'm clapping on purpose.
Like, you can't make this stuff up. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I had the vision that had been there for a long time. I took the steps to resource myself to get the support. And so what she helped me do, this coach, she's like, this is the kind of thing you need to put in your video pitch. This is what you need to have in your outline that you submit to them. So she really prepared me. They had over 300 submissions for this event, and they picked 7 speakers. So I didn't find that out until about a month after I'd been accepted. I was like, oh, okay, got it. Cool. So that felt even more, whoa, all right. So, I've been preparing. I have a lot more preparing to do in terms of getting it in my bones and stuff, but quite a bit of it is. And it's such an interesting thing to do, to say, I have 18 minutes. What do I want to say to people? And how do I want to say it? And there are things I didn't know behind the scenes TED stuff. They're very research driven. So they will flag talks that are just someone's anecdotal stuff and things that they're saying are true that are not based in evidence at all. So that's been interesting. I mean, everything I do in general has some evidence to it, but it's been an interesting journey and process. And I'm going to be doing a thing that I'll tell you this. I'll leave you with this part. I was explaining a story I was going to tell in the talk, like as part of the ending story, to the coach. So there's 2 coaches, husband and wife, that are running it. He's done a TED talk before. And I said, this is what I'm thinking, teeing it up. And he goes, so you're going to sing that, right? At that part. And I was like, yeah, you think I should? He's like, I was hoping you would say yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So there is singing in it. That is all I will say. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it feels like I would not be living out what I'm saying.
It's you.
If I didn't include that, this story that's going to be in there.
It's perfectly you. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So,
well, gosh, I can tell you this. I'm excited for you. So excited about that and all the things you're doing. And we will for sure kick that link out on our platforms when that special event drops on social media, because we're for you. We are for you, and love what you're doing. Thanks so much for joining us and being with us for another chat. Always enjoy the time that we can catch up and visit. And I've said before, I'm proud of you. I love the work that you're doing, and I wish you many, many more successes, Rachel.
I so appreciate that, Jeff. If I could leave like one more 30-second thing that I meant to say, that I'm like, I want to say this. I cannot end this episode without saying this. And it relates to the first song that I released and wrote, which is called Somebody, that I released in January 23. And the core of the song is basically this belief that the chorus is that you are somebody, you matter, you are enough. And I believe that in order for us to unmute ourselves, we have to fundamentally believe that that is true. We have to believe that we are somebody who matters. And that we are, regardless of what our qualifications or credentials or other people say, that we're good enough to try. And if we're missing that, it's going to be hard for us to find the courage to consistently show up authentically ourselves. But if we say, you know what, I am somebody who matters. I am worth hearing. I am worth seeing. I am worth sharing what is in me to share and have it be celebrated. Then we're more likely to actually find that courage and show up consistently in the most honest and bold expression of ourselves.
So well said. Oh my gosh. That gave me chills.
I was going to say, amen. we can land the plane right there. Well, thanks again, Rachel. We'll happily look forward to your many successes in the days ahead. Appreciate it so much.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Leadership Level Up. Please subscribe so you don't miss future conversations with great leaders.